Hello and welcome to a session on employment policy. Not the most exciting of topics, but really vital when we think about how we're creating the employee experience. And, our policies can say so much about the way that we view our employees, whether we trust them or not. And so whilst not the most exciting area, one of the possibly most important ones that we're going to look at. Now, obviously, we're not going to cover particular policies that would be relevant for different countries and different jurisdictions. We're going to talk more about just the problems with employment policy that we've got today and the role that HR is playing within that. Then we're going to share with you some new forms of employment policy, how to challenge your thinking to get you to a different place. And then we're going to look at how you can help managers and employees get to grips with new approaches of employment policy. So let's start with the problems with policies. Now, that might seem a slightly strange image that you've got there. And what you'll see is it's a kind of a bunch of coat hangers, the kind of coat hangers that you get in hotels. And the reason I use this image is that for me, it kind of sums up a lot of our approach to the way that we develop employment policies. If you think about what the hotel trade did to create these coat hangers, they were you can imagine them saying, guys, we've got a problem. There are a few people who are stealing some coat hangers. So let's design an approach which means that they can't be stolen. So go for the compliance angle. So they've developed these coat hangers that have got these little stick things that you see there so they've got compliance, the 1, 2, 3% of us that might want to steal a coat hanger from a hotel now can't do it. Result. Unfortunately, the 97, 98% of us who have no intention of stealing a coat hanger now can't get our clothes in and out of the blooming wardrobe, and it creates that kind of frustration. So possibly a stupid analogy, but one that I really think sums up our approach to employment policy development, which is somebody somewhere has done something wrong, an individual or a couple of individuals, so we create a policy to ensure that that behavior can then never happen again, and we apply it to everybody. So we're applying this kind of lowest common denominator thinking. Which is really problematic because what it does is it creates frustration from those people who actually have got no intention of behaving badly. There's a study that was done by Deloitte in Australia, actually, but what it looked at was the kind of red tape and unnecessary bureaucracy that are created in organizations, and it's costing us billions. It's costing us billions in terms of creating stupid rules and policies that we apply to everybody that we don't need to protect ourselves from. The next area I think that we've got a problem in relation to employment policy is that your policies are very often the first bit of contact that they'll have with you once they've signed the contract. And of course, what we do is we immediately leap into compliance thinking and we send them loads and loads of documents, data protection, anti-bribery act, whatever it might be. And we then kind of get them to sign in blood on every page. And if that's the first thing that you're showing your employees, the first bit of contact that they're having with you, what you're saying to them is this is what you can't do. And it immediately creates, I think, quite a negative impression. And then finally, I think one of the key problems with our approach to problems is that we've kind of believed that the more rules, the more prescriptive we can get, the more detailed we can get, the safer we will be, the more compliant our organization will be, the more protected it will be. And yet, actually, the more rules that we give people, the less judgment they're going to deploy. And of course, what we often see then is line managers or employees putting HR into the role of kind of compliance officer or police officer. It's our role to police these rules. And we kind of get blamed for it. You know, if it was up to me, I'd allow you, but HR won't let me. And actually, I think what we need to do in a disrupted world where we're needing our employees and managers to be much more agile, to be much more creative and innovative, we need them to be using much more judgment rather than it coming from the center, rather than it being prescribed from group or from the HR team. So a number of problems with employment policies today, and let's just give you some examples of organizations that are doing things slightly differently. Now, the first one you'll know well because it's been widely publicized, because it was so different. You know, what Netflix did as they grew, they realized they were starting to put in place rules and processes that just didn't feel like them, and that they were becoming more bureaucratic, they were becoming more constrained, they were slowing down. And they said, look, how can we halt this? How can we do it differently? And they developed a concept of what they call freedom within a framework. And this freedom within a framework approach has been adopted by lots of other organizations subsequently, but they were kind of one of the first to do it. And what this looks like is things like their expenses policy. It says, do the right thing by Netflix. You know, interestingly, their expense claims actually went down. But what I love about it is that it assumes that employees can use good judgment, and it assumes that they know how to behave, and that they will, by and large, do the right thing. They will behave well. Another example of this kind of freedom within a framework is Legal and General and their approach to dress code, you know, the kind of the bane of everyone's life in HR. Their dress code is very simple. It's just dress for your day. Dress for your day. And I like it, you know, because it's not saying you can wear jeans but not with a rip in it, you can't wear flip-flops, etc. You know, if we've got somebody turning up to a client meeting dressed in ripped jeans and sandals, chances are we've got more problems with that employee than just their outfit. And we should be tackling that individual rather than prescribing a whole range of policies from the center. Another example of this kind of fresh approach to employment policy is Gap and the approach they've taken to social media. Now, clearly, this is a minefield, and one dodgy tweet from an employee can go viral and, of course, can cause a lot of reputational harm. But what they also realize, like increasingly organizations are realizing, is that employees talking about the organization in a positive way on social media is very important in terms of brand reputation, developing a real positive impression with people who might want to join the organization. They're much more likely to believe employees who are currently working there than the careers website. So they wanted to encourage people to use social media and mention Gap if they worked there. But of course, they also were slightly worried about the impact if it went wrong. But instead of providing loads and loads and loads of rules and guidance, what they did was they said three things. They said, play nice, um, be yourself. So basically make it clear that you're not a company spokesperson. And if you mess up, they put it slightly in slightly more earthy terms, if you mess up, then put it right. And if it's a real problem, just contact the social media team. Light touch, freedom within a framework. So maybe you could think about some of your employment policies and say, you know, where are we just being too prescriptive? Where could we actually move to a much more of a freedom within a framework approach that encourages people to use their judgment? So how are organizations moving to this new approach? Because it's scary, isn't it? You know, you're kind of letting go of a bit of control. And so what are they doing to help employees and managers get to grips with this new approach? Well, first up, we could copy what TD Bank did. And what they did was very simple. They just asked their employees. They asked their employees which are the rules and policies that get in the way of you wowing customers, of you doing your best work. They called it kill a stupid bank rule. Kill a stupid bank rule. And they offered a $50 reward for the best ideas. Because it's not necessarily that we set out to create too much bureaucracy or rules that create problems for employees. It's just that over time these things build up. So continually sense checking it and involving your employees, telling you what are the problems with the rules and policies that they have to adhere to, can be a really good way of identifying them. Another approach is to do what we call reframing. Now, this is a kind of behavioral nudge, a technique in behavioral economics, which kind of says, you know, if you want to change the way that people behave, you have to reframe it in their mind. They have to look at it in a different way. And Unilever did this with their approach to flexible working. Now, we know that most flexible working policies tend to be on the basis of I'm an employee, I want to work more flexibly, I fill in a form and I present it to my line manager who may or may not allow me to work with flexible hours. Now, what they found was that this approach was prohibiting a lot of flexible working. Managers were seeing it as something that they were being asked to kind of, give generously, that part-time flexible working was seen as kind of working less than. And they were saying this is so vital in terms of our organization's growth and being able to attract the right talent and increasing the diversity of our talent pool, that actually we need to reframe this question to help managers think differently about it. So what they did was that they reframed flexible working on the basis of every job can be done flexibly. So that was the kind of the new way in which it was framed from the center. Instead of it being something that line managers could gift or refuse, actually it was the line manager's job to work out how that job could be done flexibly. Another technique that we're seeing, which is actually an educational technique, so a technique that's used in schools with teachers and their pupils, which is called scaffolding. There's a company called DNVGL. They're a large global engineering consultancy. And what they did was to apply this scaffolding to help managers use their judgment around giving out salary increases and bonuses instead of it being HR's policy and process. Now, scaffolding involves a number of steps. It's about providing some space and the opportunity to allow managers or employees, but in this case managers, allow managers to try something out, but in a safe way. So if it goes wrong, it doesn't damage their confidence, the reputation of the organization, the finances. It's a kind of a low risk approach. And what you do is you gradually move this opportunity, this scaffold, along as they progress with their understanding and their confidence. So what this looked like in practice for DNVGL was that they provided managers with a kind of theoretical exercise. They said, here are some employees, here's their market rate here's the market rate for their job, here's what they're on at the moment, this is how long they've been in the company, this is what matters to them on a personal level. Here's how they compare to their peers. And they gave them a number of employees and said, how would you allocate the bonus to these employees? They then brought them back together and said, so how did you do it? Why did you make that allowance? They challenged some of their thinking. Did you realize that you've paid all of the guys more than the females? Or how are you going to react if this person's unhappy? Or that you're going to need to replace this person further down the line. So how are you going to make sure that you keep some money in reserve? Gradually moving them from a theoretical exercise to then actually practicing with real money and real people to a place where they were able to take responsibility for themselves. So using that scaffolding technique to help managers get to grips with using their judgment. And then finally, if we're going to allow employees more freedom to operate within a framework that we provide rather than prescribing, if we're going to encourage them to use their judgment, then we have to give them more information than we're probably doing at the moment to help them make those decisions. Now, Alaska Airlines had been very kind of empowering in the way that they did policies and the level of autonomy that employees had on the front line. What they realized, though, was that you have to give the worker, as they describe it, the worker on the spot must be given enough knowledge to align his or her decisions with the organization's needs and plans. You can't just kind of give people total freedom if they don't actually understand the context and the bigger picture in which they're working in. So they had then invested in a really effective training program with the explicit goal of helping frontline employees internalize its service standards. So they had things like a video where one agent waived a fee for a passenger whose travel plans had to be changed because of an injury. And what they were doing with that was illustrating that employees were expected to make thoughtful choices on their own. Not just total freedom, not just anarchy, but thoughtful choices, but to make those decisions for themselves. So how can you help your employees and managers move to a lighter touch, freedom within a framework approach for employment policy? Ask them which are the rules that get in the way, reframe it so they look at it from a different angle, provide a scaffolding, a kind of a supported coaching program, if you like, and finally make sure that they have all the necessary information. So how do you begin to challenge your own thinking? I think applying the trust test is a really useful place to start. Ask yourself the question, does this rule or policy exist because we don't trust some of our people to do it properly? If you answer yes to that question, then chances are you will be frustrating large numbers of the good people to try and stop a few of the rogue employees. And at that point, you have to kind of say, maybe it's time to tackle the people that we don't trust. Deal with those individuals, deal with those individuals and get rid of that particular rule. Secondly, have a look at how you can replace long-winded policies which try to cover every eventuality with just a simple statement that encourages them to use their judgment. One of my favorite dress codes is a manufacturing client of ours, and they say that their dress code is, if you look in the mirror in the morning and you have to ask yourself the question, can I get away with this at work? Then you should probably get changed. Whilst it's funny and it made me laugh, actually it's really sensible because it's saying, deep down, whether something's appropriate or not. And finally, just see your employees through their eyes. So, very often we write our rules and policies from the perspective of what we feel they should know, what it is we want them to do. But actually, if you check with employees, particularly employees that are, have joined your company fairly recently, ask them, what is it that you really wanted to know when you joined? And begin to design your employment policies around what they say rather than what we think they should know. The final piece I wanted to just talk through is the kind of employee handbook. And I think here we have to see it more as a marketing document rather than a compliance document. I said at the beginning, it's very often the first impression they have of us. In this instance, why don't we see it as a marketing document rather than providing them with loads and loads of documents and procedures and policies that they have to sign? And I've given you an example here from a client of ours called Thrive Tribe, and they worked really hard on their welcome handbook, as they call it, or their Thrive they call it their Thrive Tribe Guide. And here you've got an excerpt from it. Now you'll see that it's filled with pictures, it's got their values in there, it's incredibly colourful, it's a marketing document. But I just want to zoom in on the bit about in the bottom right hand corner where they talk about their working day. Now, here it's obviously all about timekeeping and flexible working. And, sometimes we can make this so boring, but what they've done is to actually frame it in language that says we trust you and we want you to use your judgment. So right up front, we don't measure you by how many hours you work or how much you're in the office. We just care about achieving great outcomes. It talks about we trust you to manage your own workload. Yeah, let your manager know what you're doing, but we trust you to manage your own workload. At the bottom there, you've got, if you want to make a formal flexible working request, then you've got a link here to the intranet. But what they're not doing is providing you with loads of documentation on policies around flexible working and the detailed policy right up front. What they're saying is, we want you to use your judgment, we trust you to work to deliver your outcomes, and of course there's the policy in the background. So you might just want to rethink your employment policies. How could you redesign it into a marketing document that's light touch, has trust and use your judgment running throughout, with, of course, some of the legal policies as URLs, as links, hyperlinks that they can that they can access if they really want to go into that level of detail. So that's it. Hopefully this has been a useful kind of challenge for how you might do your employment policies differently. See you next time.